Hello, everybody. Welcome to our video podcast today. Today we're joined by the City of Kenmore Police Chief, Brandon Moen. Am I saying that right?
That's right.
All right. Do you want to give yourself a brief introduction to the viewers?
Sure. So I've been the police chief here in Kenmore for closing in on 5 years. I've been in law enforcement for a little over 18 years. I'm not sure I'm looking at the camera. I guess it's been about 18 years with the King County Sheriff's Office. Kenmore does not have its own standalone police department. They contract with the Sheriff's Office for police services, which a lot of cities do around King County, around the Puget Sound area. It's just more economical. So I'm an employee of King County, but I am police chief in Kenmore. All of our officers here in Kenmore, technically King County employees, but we're dedicated and stationed out here in the city.
Can you break that down a little bit more? Because I know I've seen like the King County Sheriff's police cars driving around in like nearby cities like Bothell and Lake Forest Park. So how does that work when, let's say there's a 911 call in Kenmore?
So King County, well, there's several cities that contract, like I said. On the north end, it's Shoreline, Woodinville, Kenmore, Sammamish, kind of the north end cities. So they each contract with King County. They essentially pay us to be their police department. So if you dial 911, you're going to get a King County Communication Center, and eventually a Kenmore officer will respond. The officer themselves, again, is employed by King County. The vehicle belongs to King County, but everything says Kenmore. The car says Kenmore. So it's kind of a combination of the two. As opposed to other cities like Bothell, Kirkland, Lake Forest Park, Seattle, they all have their own police department where they employ their own officers and they're a standalone agency. Whereas we work closely with King County or employed by them. So, just as an example, we have specialized detectives that work for the Sheriff's Office that will handle major crimes investigations that occur here. So rather than having a whole team of detectives here in Kenmore that we probably are not going to be able to utilize a lot because we don't have a ton of crime. We utilize the Sheriff's Office detectives as needed. So if we do have a homicide or a robbery or something a little more violent, those detectives will come in and handle that case for us as opposed to our one detective we have here.
So what do you do then? How does your job differ as the police chief of Kenmore?
So I wear a lot of hats, I will say. We are very lightly staffed here in Kenmore. We have a very small agency, a very small group of officers. So there's just myself, one detective, and if we're fully staffed, we'd have 12 patrol officers. Right now we actually have 8. So kind of a small group of officers that I have to manage as the police officer. So I'm the police chief. So I'm the only supervisor. So I do a lot of administrative tasks, managerial tasks, supervising the officers, kind of your typical law enforcement supervisor type of things they would handle. In addition to all the administrative roles for the city, where it's budgeting and the paperwork and the leadership role within the organization of the city itself. So it is a lot of different tasks that I take on, both as a leader within the community, but also a leader within the police department itself.
So how did you sort of work your way into getting that job? Was it just a lot of experience in law enforcement?
So I worked within the Sheriff's Office for about 13 years as a patrol sergeant, so being a supervisor of a unit within the Sheriff's Office. And then this opportunity opened up where our contract city of Shoreline needed a police chief, and so they advertised it, and there were several of us that applied. We came in, interviewed, and I was fortunate enough to be selected. And I suppose that they saw something in me they liked, and they selected me to do it. Really, it's a leadership role, looking for the right person that has the leadership qualities to balance all the things you have to do. It's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of balancing not only the community, but within an agency, competing interests and kind of the greater good. So it's requires a lot of juggling. But I enjoy it. It's fun. It's fun. It's a challenging job. It's certainly different than just your run-of-the-mill patrol supervision job that I was doing before. It's added an element of politics, of budgeting, of administrative duties that you wouldn't see in a lot of other roles within the sheriff's office. So I've really enjoyed it so far.
How do you guys, whether as King County as a whole or more as Kenmore, what do you do to respond to, like you mentioned, the politics? Like when people bring up issues or things that they think are going wrong within the police force, what do you guys do to respond to that?
So I try to answer as best I can within our agency. A lot of times the issues that I hear are from things that have arisen outside of Kenmore.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because we're all law enforcement, they all of those issues, he was talking, all those issues can fall upon our profession rather than just the place where it occurred. So if something happened on the other side of the country, something goes terribly wrong there, unfortunately, it falls upon our entire profession, so I end up dealing with it here. And certainly I've dealt with that in my 5 years within this role. So all I can do here is make sure that we have the policies and procedures and the training and the right people to make sure that whatever bad thing happened over there, we don't have happen here. And unfortunately, we've been very lucky to prevent or to not have any of those major incidents happen here that we've seen elsewhere. But it is a challenge because, and frustrating from kind of a personal perspective, because there's things that can happen elsewhere that I have zero control over, but can impact me and my fellow officers so greatly, and the public's perception of us, even though we have nothing to do with it. Don't condone it. We don't try to make excuses for it, but there's not a lot we can do about it because it has nothing to do with us. So there's that kind of weird relationship that you have sometimes with those incidents. In terms of the smaller issues I get complaints about, we try to deal with them as best we can because there are a lot of small like, nuisance type issues that we constantly get complaints on, like abandoned vehicles. Big thing here. People will take the car and they'll just leave it out in front of their house or out of a neighborhood and they just leave it there forever. It seems like, and the neighbors are like, this car's been sitting here for months and it doesn't move. So a small little nuisance thing, but something to that resident, that's a big deal, that car. It may be the only time they ever call the police. They may have lived here 30 years and never had to call, but that car is no big deal. So we try to treat that little seemingly minor deal as if it was something more important because it's important to that person. Trying to find that balance of, we realize that abandoned vehicles is not a crime of the century, it's not even a crime, it's just a little parking violation, but it is a big deal to that person, so we try to deal with it. Same thing with speeding complaints. Tons of speeding complaints on, there's cars speeding on my road. In the grand scheme of things, is it as big a deal as, say, a string of bank robberies or other more serious crimes we have here? No, but it's a big deal to them, and it's a safety issue, so we try to address it as best we can.
So you mentioned that, obviously, I've lived in Kenmore for, I think, coming up on like 8 years, and I've never had to call the police. I don't really have a lot of experience with crime in the area, but what are some things that you guys see or you guys get calls about that you think are real issues?
So it varies by time of year and really by year. Here recently, the past year, last couple of years, we've seen a huge spike in vehicle thefts becoming a bigger issue. And unfortunately, it's not just here, it's regionally and statewide. We've seen vehicle thefts go through the roof. And here over the past year, we've actually had per capita a higher percentage in Kenmore than we have seen region-wide for whatever reason. So that's been an issue, vehicle thefts here. Your typical kind of petty theft crimes, mail thefts, shoplifts, car prowls, things of that sort that we'd see everywhere. I don't think we're too terribly abnormal from what you'd see in Lake Forest Park or Ballpark or your run-of-the-mill thefts. what else would be the most common thing we see? Again, same thing we see in other regions, domestic violence. Just before I came down here, the officers were just out of domestic violence call and had to arrest someone, and they're now en route to jail with them. So when we have a population as large as we do, a decent sized city population, there's going to be your domestic violence calls. It's just people are not going to get along. There's going to be those issues. Here at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and there's husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend at this house fighting and arguing to the point that the police get called. You wouldn't necessarily expect that in the middle of the day on Tuesday, but it happens.
Yeah.
So here we are. That's what the officers are all dealing with right now.
And regarding that, how busy are you guys like on a day-to-day schedule? Because like it's not like Kenmore is this wide bustling city with lots of crime. I would think.
Right. We're not. No, luckily, we aren't really. The crime is not rampant by any stretch. So when we aren't responding to 911 calls, that's when the officers can be a little bit more proactive and go out to the speeding complaints and sit on the road with the radar, or just be very visible in and around the business districts, try to persuade those that may be thinking about stealing from Safeway or other places to not do it. Like I said, we're fairly lightly staffed. There's typically only 2 officers working at any time. Sometimes there's an overlap between swing shift and graveyard where we'll have more, but our minimums are 2. So it's 2 officers for upwards of 25,000 residents. So there's really a social contract that's out there that we hope that most people behave, because if they don't, there's only 2 of us there. So the hope is that people will behave themselves and not commit crime and not crash their cars and not do all the things that's going to require the police to show up.
Do you guys feel understaffed?
I think if you talk to the officers, they would say yes. That's probably the case in most police agencies. The state of Washington ranks 51st, if you include the District of Columbia, in police staffing per capita. So we're already very low in the state, and Kenmore is, I want to say, 3rd or 4th lowest in the state per capita. So we're kind of the lowest of the low in terms of staffing. That said, we do what we can with what we have, and just try to select the right officers that are experienced and can be efficient in everything they do. Kind of have to be. We also rely upon our other contract cities, like Shoreline. We have a really close relationship with Shoreline, who's also with the sheriff's office. So if something big does happen, it requires more than 2 officers, Shoreline will come over and help us. And we have a really close relationship. We have the same radio frequency, so we're hearing each other, talking to each other. They will come and work overtime in Shoreline for us. We do the same for them. It actually goes the same with other contract cities within the sheriff's office. So you may see someday out here a Burien car driving around, or a SeaTac car, or Maple Valley. You're like, why in the world is there a Maple Valley car in the middle of Kenmore stopping me on a traffic stop? Well, it's probably because they're working overtime. That's just another contract city of the sheriff's office. So that Maple Valley officer is going to get out. It's going to say City of Maple Valley, but if you look closely, the badge will say King County Sheriff. So still police officers, but just probably working overtime.
You mentioned sort of the trend of like car thefts and things like that. For young adults and people more our age, are you noticing any trends there?
So there's been, I'm sure you've heard of all of the issues with Kias and Hondas.
Yeah.
That's been well publicized. When I would go back over the past few years to crime stats, I actually haven't seen locally that issue necessarily of those cars. There's been no more greater percentage than, say, Fords or Chevys. Now, region, statewide, nationwide, that's a different story. But for whatever reason here, we haven't seen any particular model or type targeted greater than others, I should say. The advice I guess I would give for younger people in particular is just be wise about where you park. The obvious stuff. Leave your doors locked. Don't leave the keys in ignition. We say don't leave the keys in ignition. People leave keys in ignition all the time. You wouldn't believe how many times cars get stolen. People just leave the keys in ignition. I'm like, come on. asking for your car to be stolen. So don't leave it running in the morning. Like if you're gonna go to school, don't start it. Go inside and leave it running outside. I know there's some options if you have the fob, maybe you could do that, or if you have some cars you have the remote, you can remote start it. So in theory, it can be driven off. That's kind of a different thing, but we do get occasionally the theft where the person leaves the key in the ignition, leaves it running, even with the doors locked. If they have an extra key, somebody can still break out the window and take it off. So be mindful of stuff like that. As with any crime, whether it be a vehicle theft or anything else, you're kind of, as cruel as it sounds, you kind of want them to hit the neighbor, not you. You know, don't be the easy crime victim. Let the person who's not as mindful be the crime victim and not you. So that means, like at your house, you want to keep things trimmed so that you can see in the windows and people can't hide around the front door, locking mailboxes, all those simple crime tip things that you probably hear and read everywhere. You do all those things simply so that you're not the target. Don't be the easy target. So that's probably the best advice I can give.
When it's something like, a car theft, I know that's sort of an issue, but not really as much in this area as it is in other places. But what can you guys as law enforcement do in a response to that? Is it more of a follow-up, or is it prevention, or what's your role there?
So our role, that can be a frustrating one, especially here in this state. Over the past few years, we've been unable to, all the police agencies have been unable to pursue stolen vehicles. So if I got behind a stolen vehicle, I sort of broadcast it from this to everyone, but most people know, this has been well publicized in the media. If I get behind a stolen vehicle, try to stop them, and they speed off, we cannot pursue them. We simply would wave to them and off they go. So it's difficult to catch the car thief when we're not able to pursue them. So that's been an issue in the last few years, where a lot of car thieves have simply just gone uncaught because we can't track them down. So it's a little more difficult to catch them after the fact through follow-up, where sometimes you get fingerprints from the car, or video that was seen on the car, you recognize them. There's chances of doing that, but it's a pretty difficult case to prove. And when we do catch someone in a stolen car, say a common scenario is a vehicle at Safeway, someone says there's someone passed out in the front seat, we get there, run the plate, the car's stolen. So we box it in and lock it so you can't get out. Okay, so that's pretty easy, you can't escape, right? So you pull them out, arrest them. We still have to prove, for the prosecutor, that they knew the car was stolen. Because we can't prove that he stole the car, he's just sitting there. But we need to prove that he knew that vehicle was stolen in order to charge him with possession of a stolen vehicle. So how do you prove that he knew the car was stolen? Typically that means looking at the ignition and saying, well, you're sitting in the car, you're starting with a screwdriver, the ignition's all torn out, probably a clue it's stolen. So that's the type of thing, that's a case where you probably could prove you knew or should have known that, hey, you're driving a stolen car. Even if you're not the one that stole it, your buddy stole it, or your buddy gave it to you, and you borrowed it, or you rented it. If it's being started by a screwdriver, common sense person would know that that's probably a stolen car. So long story short, the motor vehicle thefts, it's a tough one to solve. We just do the best we can with the cases we have. I try to focus on recovering the vehicles as quickly as possible, because these are, I think some people look at vehicles and houses, sometimes just property crimes. It's just a property crime, it's not violent crime. But to that person, that car is like their lifeline. That's how they get to work. That's how they get to school. That's how they get their kids to daycare. Without that car, their life is really disrupted and may make it very difficult for them. So I view it more than just property crime, it's something more. So if we can recover those vehicles quicker, we try to. That means looking for the stolen cars just dumped in a parking lot somewhere. Oftentimes the graveyard cars, when the parking lots are empty, they'll just go there at night, 3 in the morning, go, okay, what cars are here? Why are they here? And go run the plates, because why is there a car in the parking right lot, far corner? Yeah. it's probably maybe it will be stolen. So go run the plate and see it's there, and then we're able to get that car that may have been sitting there for quite a while back to its owner. So yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
What are you expected to do when you're not allowed to pursue a car theft? Like, are you just supposed to watch them drive off?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, if we can identify them prior to them speeding off, either pulling up and identifying them visually before they speed off, we can, but even that's difficult to do. They normally see us coming and the second they see us, they'll take off. Now here recently, the state law did change that gave us a little more leeway. So there are some agencies now in the state that will pursue stolen cars. The sheriff's office is not one of them. And I'd say most of the larger agencies, especially in Puget Sound region, are going to continue not pursuing stolen cars. There's that balance of risk to the public versus the crime. Is it worth, again, a property crime, is it worth risking the public's safety as we're weaving through traffic at 80 miles an hour through Bothell Way? We have to weigh that. So the pursuit that's in the middle of the night with there's no traffic and it's dry pavement and there's no one around, it's a pretty easy pursuit for officers to handle. We train for that. It's not a bad one, but rush hour traffic, high speeds, the driver running red lights, and then it gets dangerous. And then we really have to weigh, is it worth the risk to the public? And oftentimes the property crimes, unfortunately, it's viewed as no, it's not worth the risk. So we end up not pursuing.
One final little segment before we let you go. So for people our age, people in high school, people who maybe just recently went to college, if they're interested in a career in law enforcement, what steps do you recommend they take?
So there's a few different options. And I should preface this with my path to law enforcement, which was not the one I would recommend in this situation, because I wanted to be a cop my entire life, growing up, I should say. Growing up, I wanted to be a cop. It's all about being that. But for whatever reason, the road led me a different route. I was going to be a city planner. My degree's in urban planning. I worked for an engineering firm out of college for 5 years, and I just got bored to tears with it and wanted to do something else. I went on some ride-alongs with a couple agencies, and I was hooked. Like, I got to do this. This is so much fun. It's unpredictable. You never know what one day is the next. And here I am 18 years later. So a little more non-traditional route. If you knew right out of the bat,
Gate.
right out of the gate.
Or right off the bat, right?
Right off the bat. That's so I was combining gate and bat. Goodness gracious. If you knew that you were going to go the route of law enforcement, there are a lot of things you can do. You can get a degree in criminal justice, which is helpful when you're applying. You could do internships. You could be in an Explorer program if you're in high school. Actually, under 21, you could be in an Explorer program where you're doing some police training and working at police events. But really the biggest thing is just, one, staying out of trouble, and 2, getting good grades, and 3, just being a good person. The stuff that kids do when they're young can come back to bite you, even if it's not criminal in nature. Just you have a good reputation and stay out of trouble. I think it opens up so many doors, whether it be in law enforcement or anything else. And so I preach to people to just stay out of trouble and get good grades, and the road for life to life will take you wherever it takes you, whether it be law enforcement or medical school or whatever. Being a welder, whatever it is, but that door, that path will be a lot easier if you stay out of trouble, you get good grades. That's just what I always say. And then if you decide after you do some engineering or like I did, and decide I just don't want to do this, and you want to change careers in your mid to late 20s, you have the opportunity to do it because you set it up with that staying out of trouble, getting good grades early on. So that's my advice.
Is there anything else you want to say to our audience before we let you go?
Don't speed on Simon's Road because the amount of complaints I get more complaints about speeding on Simon's than every other road in Kenmore combined, including Bothell Way, which has 1,000 times more traffic. So please don't speed on Simon's Road. In fact, the city before long, and I don't know when it's going to happen, is going to put up school zone speed cameras on Simon's in that school zone. I don't know. My guess is next year or something. So much like the infamous ones at Arrowhead and Kenmore Elementary, the same thing will be outside Inglemore. But what's going to happen though, and this is not widely known, is that all three of those cameras are actually end up being on 24/7. So if you speed down Simon's at noon or 3 in the morning, when the school zone is obviously not active, but it's still, it's about to be 30 miles an hour. They're changing Simon's at 30. And you go through that 45, you can get a ticket at 3 a.m., even though it's not a school zone. So slow down, please. And those cameras, that's the other thing too, is that those have been authorized now statewide, so you're gonna see a bunch of those cameras everywhere, every city you go in. And the ticket goes to the owner of the car, so if you're driving your parents' car, they're gonna get that ticket and go, oh, great.
I'm sure our viewers will take that in consideration. You guys know who you are.
Slow down, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. It was great having you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Best of luck.